Hi everyone. Is suffering good for us? This is a big question, and a lot of people on YouTube and my community are asking me this. Should we suffer? Should we strive for perfection and happiness, or should we dwell a little bit in the suffering itself? And this is what I want to answer in this video. Now, we all know that suffering is a part of life. And let me give you an example. Every one of us, at some point in life, have blamed our parents, our childhood, for creating some sort of trauma or negative emotions that we are carrying with us and has become a part of our story or a part of our character. Now, it doesn't matter if the parent was beating the child up or doing horrific things like raping them or anything like that. Or the the child grew up in an environment that was all giving and all loving. It doesn't matter. The child will eventually look back and say, because this happened, or because you did this to me, I can't stand you. Or I've become this and this type of person, for example. So it doesn't matter what really happened. We would look at it from the perspective of negating it before we deal with our problems, of course. But when we're bringing things up to the surface, we notice that it doesn't matter what type of childhood we had. We're going to complain about it quite a lot. And this brings me to suffering. Now, there's a huge difference between the way that we perceive suffering from the Eastern cultures to the Western cultures. In the West, we try to ignore suffering. We try to suppress negative emotions. We say to ourselves, oh, it's only happiness. Look at Facebook, for example. It's full of pictures of people that are happy all the time. You know, couples and relationships that we know they're suffering. We know they have arguments and fights, and we know that they're in the heat of the moment. You know, that if you would take a picture like that and put it on Facebook, I think you'll get a lot more likes and attention. But in the West, we're trying to show that we are not suffering, that we are always happy, because that attracts people, right? That attracts our smile, you know, you can say, our positivity. But everyone that is like that has their down points in life, you know? Sometimes they're suffering, sometimes they're having a difficult time as well. So that's in the West. Why? Because we have been taught to strive for something. We have been taught that happiness comes only when we achieve something. So we're trying to achieve a better job, we're trying to achieve finishing school, we're trying to achieve better grades in the beginning, and then happiness is not true happiness. Why? Because what happens between those achievements? What happens 2 months after you start a relationship and the phase that you're completely in love is faded away? What happens? Now in the East, according to the Dalai Lama, there's a lot more suffering. You see people, poverty, people that don't have any money in the streets. You know, when I was traveling in India, I saw a girl that had one hand sleeping in the street, and she jumped on me. You know, in India it's quite disgusting in the cities if you've ever traveled there. So you're quite in shock once you land. And she was so happy. She just followed me around. I gave her food. We talked. You know, we were walking around for hours and hours and hours. And I saw more happiness with her than I saw with any Western that I've ever met. And she was like 10 years old and sleeping in the street with her mom. Okay. So the Dalai Lama actually says that happiness and suffering are a part of life. And the sooner that you accept that suffering is a part of life and negativity is a part of life, and you don't act like you have been taught and trained by the Western mind, see it for what it is. It is a contrast, so you can appreciate whatever it is that you have. Now, how do you do that? You become more and more aware of the negative emotions as they come. And you see that you're not trying to suppress them. For example, somebody says, you're feeling bad, somebody said something bad about you, you had a very tiring day at work, and your spouse comes and they ask you, how are you doing? And you just say, okay. But you know it's not okay. You know it's not okay. Just say, I had a very bad day at work. I need some time for myself. I need to take a 10-minute walk. You have to deal with it by confronting it first, admitting it. Admitting it means you're taking responsibility for the negative emotions that you have. And you have to understand, suffering is a part of life. Why? Because eventually you're going to appreciate it. When you get old, you appreciate your entire life. When you're young, you don't understand. You don't understand that you have so much time for yourself. You know, I'm talking about kids. They finish school at 1, 2, they have all this time. Amazing. When you're an adult, you have responsibilities, you have obligations, you're learning, you know. So what happens is that you're taking 2 steps back in order to take 10 steps forwards. And what happens when we assume responsibility on the emotional level, okay? It means that we are growing in our spiritual level. Why? Because the whole idea of the human journey is to go through experiences, emotions, deal with them, and everything was pre-planned by us and our guides. You can say that our guides are our future self, the one that perceives it from the future and has come back for a vacation of experiences in order to grow and mature as a soul. So when you deal with your suffering and you don't suppress the way that you feel, you're actually becoming much more in a meditative state. What you will notice is that the suffering or the negative emotion, whatever it is, sadness, pity, anger, fear, jealousy, once you admit it, it goes away. And it's sort of like after the first time you got your heart broken, and almost everyone understands what I'm talking about, it took a while. Maybe it took weeks. Maybe the trauma is still there, you're still thinking about it. But with time, the second time and the third time, it became very, very, very short. So sometimes, for example, when I see something negative, when I think about something sad, I experience it in full, in my whole body. But it happens only for a couple of seconds. I allow it to let go. I allow myself to cry with other people. I've been on television a few times and I cried every time I was there. I never even thought about, being the big macho guy, that doesn't cry and has to be strong. I'm a very strong individual. And I allow all this suffering to occur. I deal with it in my own way, but it moves through the body. And when you do that, your body is going to be cleansed. And this is one of the things that you have to do, by the way, when you become a breatharian. In the initiation itself, we go through a process of forgiveness and remembrance of our whole life and getting it out of the system because it's stuck in the body. It is stuck in the body. And this is the source and the origin of so many different diseases, and people don't even know that. And in the new German medicine, by the way, which is an alternative way of seeing medicine, for every disease, doesn't matter where it is, if it's in your right hand, if it's in the left lung, it serves a purpose, and there's a reason that it happened in the way that it happened. So they analyze you and they see the aura and they tell you, this is the trauma that you didn't deal with. For example, me and my father. Or for example, you and the child that molested you when you were 10 years old, or the bully at school that you still didn't go through a process of forgiveness with. So to conclude, suffering is a part of life. When you look at it in the Western world, we're trying to suppress it all the time. Okay, we're trying to show something that we are not. That's why you look at people, in the media. Everybody's trying to be something that they are actually not. When we're pretending not to be ourselves, how can we connect to our higher self? How can we get that guidance when we're showing that we don't trust the thing that we came with? With the arsenal of tools that we are born with, every one of us is a unique snowflake, and we're trying to please other people by changing ourselves. That is true suffering. And I'll just finish with one thing. When Buddha came back from his 40-day meditation and became the Buddha, because before that he was just a normal guy, I guess. When he achieved the state that is also called the consciousness of Christ state, the only thing he said is that I can't teach them what I know. I can only try to minimize the human suffering, which is not a physical suffering, but the forgetfulness of who we truly are. Namaste, my friends.